What is up, fam? It's your boy Sunil. Thank you so much for tuning in to So Real Sports Talk. We have a very special guest, my man Jack Hammer, newly minted of the Press Democrat. Thank you so much for coming on, Jack. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Sunil. I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely. And before we get into anything, Jack, you obviously laid out some pretty big news as far as a new opportunity that you took on. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about and what exactly we can expect from this new opportunity?
It's the Press Democrat. I followed them for a long time. The Inside the Flyers blog there is really kind of how I got my start with doing this whole thing. I commented over there from 2011 for a few years there, and at one point the other commenters over there had said, hey, you should start your own blog. So I did that. I had my own blog for a little while. That led to me doing some work for 49er Web Zone, and then also Niners Radio. So I was doing some writing before. It all kind of came from having been a regular commenter over at the Inside the Flyers blog at the Press Democrat back when Grant was running the show over there, and then when Grant went over to Sports Illustrated, I followed him as far as the stuff he was reading. There wasn't really a whole lot. The amount of material at the Press Democrat wasn't quite as much. There just weren't as many updates. You were getting maybe one a week here and there. It wasn't like it had been in the past. So I decided to go do some other stuff, and I kind of kept an eye on what was going over there. And I just decided at the end of the season that I was going to take a shot, throw my name in the ring. See if there might be an opening. There wasn't anything that I knew of, but I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to take a shot. I'm going to let them know that I'm interested and that I think I can help them out. And that's what I did. And then just kind of from that point on, it was just kind of a little bit of a waiting game because, like I said, there was nothing that was open for sure. And just finally they reached out to me about a month and a half ago, saying that there was some interest. Sent over some samples, and just kind of took off really in the last month and a half, and we just really nailed everything down about a week ago.
That's amazing, man. Congratulations. And Grant was talking yesterday, you're getting a credential now, right?
I'm working. We're working on getting all that stuff settled right now.
That's amazing.
The whole COVID-19 thing kind of makes things a little bit different for the media in terms of the number of people that they can let in and have in the locker room. So we're working on that piece, but definitely working on being able to get to the practices. That's really my main thing right now, is to be able to be there to watch practices, to be able to report on the practices for the readers and so on and so forth. So right now I know for sure I'll be there Friday. Beyond that, we're still getting those details all worked out.
That's amazing, Jack. And, it's going to be great to have another insider in the circle. So congratulations, man. Definitely well-deserved. And I know we talked, maybe we can announce it. We talked about doing a regular weekly show now. We're shooting for Mondays at around 7. We'll see, obviously, with your newfound celebrity as far as, with the press credentials, we might have to move that around. But, obviously great to see, the friends and fam doing well. So congratulations again. And man, I'm looking forward to seeing your work.
Yeah. No, we're going to definitely, you and I are definitely on for Monday nights at 7:00. I kind of knew what was going on even before you and I agreed to that. So we're definitely on for 7:00 on Monday night. Unless the 49ers are playing, then we'll bump it back to right after the game's over with. But yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So obviously we're coming off of the heels of some breaking news. Kyle Shanahan and Lynch just had a press conference. So what were your takeaways from the 15 minutes that were actually televised to, the public? I heard a lot of echoes, but did you take away anything? What was the biggest thing that you saw in the little bit that we did see?
Yeah, the biggest takeaways, I think everybody heard, Jimmy Garoppolo is the starting quarterback, and that there's not going to be a splitting of reps in the beginning. And I don't think that was anything really new. That's something that Shanahan's kind of mentioned for a while. You go back to right after OTAs, and he did an interview where he mentioned that it's up to Trey Lance, and I think that's where he still is. It's up to Lance. Nothing's changed since the end of OTAs because they haven't been together, as he said in the press conference today, for 40 days. So once they get together, it's all on Lance to show that he can push Garoppolo, and the better he performs and the more ready he shows himself to be, I think we'll see that competition evolve throughout the training camp. So that's one of them, and the other one was Bosa and Ford and Hurd all being healthy, not going on PUP to start the training camp. I think that's a big deal too, as far as Bosa, we kind of felt all along like he was going to be making a comeback and he was going to be out there, but Ford and Hurd are two guys we haven't really known a whole lot about. We got a little bit of a word on it last week that Ford was looking good, but none of us really knew. But I think the fact that he's not going to be on PUP is really a big deal, potential big deal for the 49ers heading into the training camp here.
And amazing timing for the show that we were scheduled to do anyways, right? We had no idea that news was coming out, but this was something that we had already kind of figured out a few days ago. So great timing there. I do want to delve in a little bit about that first thing. Now, do you feel like Trey Lance not being signed yet is going to play a role in kind of forcing him not to be able to really contend for that starting job coming up, week one?
I think that every practice he misses, if he does miss practices because of this contract thing, it does set him back a little bit. But at the same time, if you listen to the reports and you take them, at face value, he was doing well when the OTA periods ended, and he had he had digested the entire playbook. So, if he misses one or two practices right at the beginning here where they're not in pads, maybe not that big of a deal. But if it goes beyond that, then it does become an issue that might hold him back a little bit here in training camp. So they definitely need to try to get this wrapped up as soon as possible.
And my second thing is, so I am kind of sometimes a conspiracy theorist, right? So when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo, I was one person that the minute that Trey Lance was drafted, I went on Grant Cohn's show and I said, you will never hear another negative word out of Kyle Shanahan about Jimmy Garoppolo. Yep. Now you contrast that to what it was like before Trey Lance was drafted, where all you heard was very lukewarm praise of Jimmy Garoppolo and sometimes just throwing Jimmy Garoppolo under the bus. So I kind of feel as if Kyle Shanahan is trying to tell the girlfriend that he knows he cheated on that he didn't cheat and how much he loves this girl that he cheated on. And it seems like that's the kind of passion that it's coming across when he's propping up Jimmy Garoppolo. Do you get that same sense, or do you believe him at face value that Jimmy Garoppolo is his day one starter?
I don't know if I don't know if he said that Jimmy Garoppolo is his day one starter in terms of week one of the season. He says he might. Yeah, I think I do take him at face value, and that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be his day one starter on the first day of training camp. But I think that's going to be something that's going to evolve. And like I said, kind of at the beginning, it's all. This whole thing is dependent on Trey Lance, because you don't spend the money, the capital that they used to get him, if you're not expecting him to be the guy and you don't want to move on to him as soon as possible. So I think that he's doing a little bit of what you said, as far as trying to hype him up and make sure everybody knows how much he wants him. And at the other part of it, I also think that he's saying he is the best quarterback, because we've only had 7 practices with Trey. I think in the back of his mind, he wants Lance to be the starter, but he needs Lance to show up before he can actually name him that. So that kind of goes back along with something that we've talked a lot about, like on our roundtables and everything, is that they're not going to just hand him the job. He needs to go out and win it, and that's not going to happen until they get into training camp and he's actually on the field.
Got you. So, I mean, this is obviously one of the biggest things that everybody's going to be eyeing during training camp is really seeing the quarterback competition. It's obviously going to overshadow everything else in training camp. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm sure it's not the last time we're going to talk about it, but a few things I took from the press conference. One is Kyle Shanahan's hair was just amazing. He looked great. His hair looks like something that you could put on a Ken doll. And me, who is somebody who's follically challenged, really admires people that have great hair like that. And the second thing, I really feel like Kyle Shanahan is usually real calm, collected, no matter what he talks about. is really no passion. But when he's speaking about Jimmy G being his starting quarterback, it seems like there's a lot of passion there. And to me, that's really telling. I don't know if it's going to play out. We'll see week 1 who's the starter. But to me, it really feels like Kyle Shanahan is out of character when he's talking about Jimmy Garoppolo. So those are my 2 biggest takeaways. Take it for what it is.
Do you feel like maybe he's a little overdoing it? Is that kind of what you mean by
that?
Yeah,
like overdoing it because, I mean, it's like we forgot about how he's spoken about Jimmy Garoppolo up until this point. Like, what has changed? It's not one game that Jimmy Garoppolo has played, yet the whole outlook of how Shanahan looks at Jimmy Garoppolo has changed. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. You know what I mean? And so, like, that's where it's just like, it to me, it's just he's trying to get him elevated in the eyes of someone to take Jimmy Garoppolo on, right? If Kyle Shanahan's, this is my starting quarterback, he's hoping that his pull as an offensive genius and how he's looked upon in NFL circles, that some team is going to be like, well, if Kyle Shanahan loves this guy, maybe we should make a move for him because he might be available. And I think that's more what I see than him actually like really believing that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be his starter.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, but let's move on. So one thing that's been really interesting to me whenever we talk about the 49ers defense and especially the secondary, it's kind of a foregone conclusion that Jason Verrett's going to get injured. And people are just acting like he's not on our team. Like, it's just like, okay, who's going to be the person that replaces him? We have a weak secondary. You know, it's just like nobody's acting as if Jason Verrett is going to play. And I understand that because obviously his track record hasn't shown a lot of the ability to stay healthy. But one thing that we have to take under consideration is Jason Verrett signed a 1-year contract when he could have pushed for a multiple-year contract coming off of the best season that he's had in quite a long time. So he believes that maybe he's figured something out to stay healthy, and he's banking on himself to have a really productive season because unless he could show that he could stay healthy the whole season and produce, he's not going to get a big money long-term contract, which is obviously what he's vying for, betting on himself for that 1 year. So tell me a little bit about what a healthy Jason Verrett does for the 49ers secondary and what kind of player he is and how that would benefit the defense as a whole.
Yeah, I before I get there, I agree with what you're saying. I think that he definitely bet on himself for this season. If my memory serves me correctly, he had some offers that would have been for multiple seasons, like 2 or 3 years, but they weren't going to pay him quite as much what he thought he was deserved, and so that's why he decided to come back to San Francisco and bet on himself, as you said, and you know, kind of on a prove it deal, which works out really good for the 49ers. And the reason it works out good for the 49ers is because when he's healthy, he's one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. He's shown that in the 2 seasons that he's been healthy. You know, when he was down in San Diego, the 1 year while he's there, and the 1 year last year here in San Francisco, he shows the ability to be a top level cornerback that really can shut down the best receivers in the league. He did it against DeAndre Hopkins, you know, in Arizona at the end of the season, and he played well throughout once he got the call in place of Richard Sherman. And the impact that he brings is he allows them to run a lot more man coverage because he's able to lock it down, and that allows them to be a little more aggressive also with their linebackers and their blitz packages, linebackers and safeties. So if Jason Verrett can stay healthy for the majority of 2021, it's going to be a huge bump for the 49ers.
And, you know, obviously, I think the NFC West probably has the biggest gauntlet of receivers of any division, right? You were talking about, it pretty much seems like there's 2 wide receiver ones with every single team in the NFC West. So having a lockdown corner that you could kind of leave in man-to-man coverage to guard somebody one-on-one is imperative. Tell me some of the, you know, when you're looking at film of Jason Verrett, what makes him so elite? Like, what about his game causes him to be a type of player where you could trust him one-on-one against elite receivers that he's going to be, you know, facing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, you know, he has the ability to stick to guys, like, as I mentioned, in man coverage, but he's also really good with his eyes. You know, you go back, and I don't remember which game it was. I think it was the Rams game where he's in coverage down low, and he's he's in man coverage, but he's also got his eyes in the backfield, and he sees the pass is going to go behind him, and he jumps off of his man and goes and picks off the ball in the back of the end zone. I think that was against the Rams. So it's plays like that you see from him. He's a smart football player that knows, that can see everything that's happening in front of him, and is able to make plays that aren't necessarily as they're drawn up. And I think that's what makes a player, instead of just a good football player, makes him special. It makes him, a top player for any team. That's what we saw a little bit of Richard Sherman in 2019 in the beginning of the season, and that kind of wore off as he got tired throughout that year.
Now, it seems like with DeMeco Ryans taking over the reins with the defense and the style of cornerback that they brought in through the draft this season, with a guy like Ambry Thomas, who also is an aggressive on the line of scrimmage, man-to-man type cover corner. It seems like maybe the defense is scheming towards playing more man-to-man. Obviously, we saw it a little bit at the end of last season, them playing more man-to-man and less of that zone type defense that they were playing. What do you think that, or do you believe that that's the style that they're about to switch to, or do you think it's still going to be, kind of the zone coverage that Salah used to play a lot?
I think we're going to see more of the man coverage. I think that's why they went out, and in the draft, the guys that they drafted are guys who have shown the ability to play very well in man coverage. Ambry Thomas played a ton of man coverage at Michigan. That was really their base defensive coverage in 2019 and in the earlier part of his, during his career there. I know in 2019 they did play a little bit more zone under Dan Brown, but before that they were definitely a man coverage team all the time. So he's a guy who definitely fits that, and so does Lenoir. So I look to see more man coverage from the 49ers than we've seen in the past. Probably somewhere along the lines of what we saw in the second half of last season. Maybe, I don't know if we're going to see a whole lot more than that, because we saw quite a bit of it once Verrett replaced Sherman, and Sherman was basically out of the mix.
And what do you think that will do as far as opening up things for the rest of the defense, especially with the kind of talent we have on the defensive line? Being able to go man and have the corners just kind of play man with their receiver, what does that do for guys like Fred Warner, guys like Bosa, guys like Ebukam? How does that change what they have to do with their, designated roles?
Well, I think what we're going to see is you're going to see more blitzing, and the 49ers have a lot of versatility between their linebackers and their safeties. Jimmy Ward and Jaworski Tart bring a lot of versatility to be able to mix and match who they're covering, in man coverage as well on the back end. So you have them, you'll be able to have them manned up on the outside, but those guys, you're not sure who's manning who, and one of them is going to probably be coming on a blitz. So that's going to help the defensive line out. Like, so Samson Ebukam and Nick Bosa, they're going to get helped out, I think, a little bit by blitzing from the linebackers and safety positions. That kind of seems to be the general consensus that you continue to hear as the 49ers players have been interviewed throughout the offseason, is that they're looking to be more aggressive, be more in that playmaker role. And I think a lot of that's going to be coming from them blitzing and being put in man coverage situations where they have opportunities to create turnovers that way.
That's going to be exciting to see. If the 49ers can now be a team that turns the ball over a lot in the secondary, that defense could just even take another level of, up as far as their elite ability, especially with that D-line, to have corners that could actually intercept the ball. That's going to be pretty amazing to see. So some other big news that came out, obviously Fred Warner, when he was doing his presser, really spoke highly about Dee Ford, saying that he felt like Dee Ford was healthy and is definitely going to play this season. Obviously that coupled with what we heard from Shanahan, him believing that a guy like Dee Ford is going to pass his physical. He wasn't on the PUP list. So it's looking more and more likely that Dee Ford might be somebody that could actually influence the season this year and actually get on the field. We haven't seen him play in quite a long time, to the point where maybe some people have forgotten what he's able and capable of doing. So can you give us a little bit of reminder of what a healthy Dee Ford, or even if he's 80% of what he is at his peak, what does that mean for the defensive line, and how will that affect the defensive line rotation?
Yeah, if Dee Ford can come back and he can be the Dee Ford that they had in 2019, that's going to be a big boost for this defense, because in 2019, he did miss 5 games, but in the 11 games that he played, he affected everything across there. When you look at the numbers, I don't have them in front of me, but there was a big difference, a big drop off in the amount of sacks and quarterback hits that the 49ers had through the last 5 weeks of the season when he was out of the roster, the lineup. So he just brings so much speed off the edge, and if he's able to show that his ability to do that, if he's able to still do that this year, that's going to help out Eric Armstead. That's going to help out Javon Kinlaw, and it's even going to help out Nick Bosa, because all 3 of those guys away from on the other side, away from Dee Ford, all struggled in 2019 when he wasn't on the field. You go back and watch 2019; they were really good those first 11 games. They fell off the last 5. He came back for the playoffs, and all of a sudden the pass rush was reborn again. And I think that's really what they're hoping that happens. Ebukam is a guy who can fill that position to a certain extent, but he's never done it before. So I'm in my estimation, I think they're not expecting Ford to come in and play 50% of the snaps. They're looking for him to be able to come in and play almost as a splitting time with Ebukam, almost as being the starter in that role, but knowing that he's going to even be playing a little bit less than he played in 2019, at least early on in the season, and roll through. So that's one that's going to be interesting to watch and see how it plays out, and see if he actually is on the roster week 1, or if he's maybe on one of the other designations as they get into camp, and where he has to be held out for a few weeks.
Now let's say he does play, and let's assume it's later on in the season, just because they're resting him or whatnot. Which players, you kind of said Armstead already, but what players do you think benefit the most from a guy like Dee Ford being there, and who do you think he replaces? I guess who will start getting less playing time because Dee Ford is there?
The guy that's going to get less playing time would be Samson Ebukam. At least that's how I see it, because that's kind of the role that Ebukam plays, and I don't think you're going to want to replace Nick Bosa. Unless you're doing something where you have Dee Ford on one side and Samson Ebukam on the other on the outside, and you're bringing Nick Bosa in and rushing him more from the middle of the defensive line, because the 49ers did do that every once in a while in 2019 as well. So they moved him around a little bit. So I think that's the guy who you're going to see get less reps would be Ebukam, because that's the role that Ford plays. Because Ford isn't going to be an every down player. You're going to have Armstead at one spot, then you're going to have DJ Jones most likely, and Javon Kinlaw at the other position inside, with Bosa over on the other edge. So most likely Samson Ebukam would be the guy to lose some reps.
Man, when you were talking about what that lineup would be like if Dee Ford's there, you're saying Dee Ford, maybe Samson on one side, Bosa, Kinlaw. I mean, the addition to Dee Ford enhances that defensive line to tremendously, right? We're talking about an elite rusher that, if he has anything left in the tank, takes this defensive line that already was probably the strength of the 49ers defense and makes them pretty elite, where now they're competing with being one of the top defensive lines in the game. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, they're going to be there. If Dee Ford is able to come on and do what we're talking about here, that definitely elevates them. I think right now they're definitely in the upper half, probably in the top 10. They have the ability, the capability of doing that, because they're really deep in the middle. The edges are a little bit on. You and I think when we spoke last time, we talked about how the edges of the defense, I think, were a little bit on the weaker side. I think we had that conversation. Mm-hmm. Adding Dee Ford to that really kind of changes that whole discussion, because now you've got really good depth, because Dee Ford is not just a pass rusher that you're hoping can win. If he's healthy, he's a guy that's going to win. And it just makes that whole defensive line, I say it puts them in the top 5, maybe in the top 3 right away.
And all of a sudden now the offensive line has problems that they have to figure out to solve. Where do you hedge? Do you hedge towards Bosa, or do you hedge towards Dee Ford? Because one of them is probably getting a one-on-one matchup when both of them are on the field. And more times than not, both of them are beating a one-on-one matchup. You know what I mean? So it makes that defensive line extremely tricky, and I'm just getting excited just thinking about it. So even the fact that there's even a chance, right? Because there was no thought in our minds. We just thought that was dead money. I think in one of the roundtables, we were talking about what's the worst contract on the books. And I said Dee Ford, because we're paying him and he probably won't even play it down. Now we're talking about he's going to pass his physical, and we got players like Fred Warner saying he's definitely going to play. So we're talking about a total 180 shift, which is really, really exciting to hear. Actually, some good news. People becoming healthy rather than the opposite way of people like coming out during injury.
Yeah, so that's good. That's going to be a tough one. You know, I'm trying to put together my 53-man roster prediction right now, and just kind of looking at what I had down for my defensive line. I don't have him there, and I have 9 defensive linemen on the roster, and we know it's not going to be Nick Bosa is going to be there. Eric Armstead's going to be there. Then the only edge guys they have really are Arden Key and Samson Ebukam. Those are the other 2 guys. So I don't see Key as a guy that they're going to move away from. I don't see Ebukam as a guy they're going to move away from either. So does a guy like maybe Maurice Hurst all of a sudden not make the roster because because he's more of an interior guy, but you're kind of balancing out between the edge and the interior. So that's going to be really that really changes a whole lot of things, and it's kind of making me have to really rethink this as I'm trying to put this together right now.
And a lot of people have been talking about the 49ers need to go after another D lineman, and they were kind of wondering why are they not going after some of these names. Maybe they knew all the while that Dee Ford is coming back. He is going to be productive. They are getting I forget the guy who's coming back from suspension halfway through the season as well. That also plays Willis on the edge. Yeah, Willis that also plays on the edge, right? So now all of a sudden that defensive line is extremely deep and crowded. Mm-hmm. Bringing somebody in. They're maybe not even making the roster, right? We have some good players that aren't going to make the roster based off of what we have right now. So a lot has changed with just that one move of Dee Ford being available. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and real quick to your point, I mean, they've brought in defensive linemen for workouts the last few days. I think they might have signed one yesterday. I don't think I've seen anything official from the 49ers, but it's kind of like you said, they're not guys that are necessarily name guys who you expect a whole lot to come from them. So it makes sense that Dee Ford is likely to be healthy and going to be able to provide them something this year.
Whoo! Man, Dee Ford and Bosa together on the edge with Kinlaw and Armstead in the middle. That's scary, man. That's definitely scary, and I bet you the rest of the NFC West is kind of like shivering in their britches right now, hearing that Dee Ford is actually going to be healthy and might play a significant role this season. So, but we'll move on. Another person that surprisingly wasn't on the PUP list, and Kyle Shanahan saying he believes he's going to pass his physical, is Jalen Hurd, and a lot of conversation has surrounded around who that third wide receiver is going to be. Had a conversation with Ben yesterday where, I thought it was going to be Mo Sanu just because I didn't believe Hurd was actually going to be healthy. But if he is healthy, we've seen him very briefly in his rookie season before he went out in the preseason. But Jack Hammer, if Jalen Hurd is healthy and able to play, what does he bring to that wide receiver core? And where do you see him fitting in with the receivers that we have right now?
Just based on the little bit of that we've seen of him, because all we've seen of him is the one quarter from his first preseason game, I think in 2018 it was. But he's a guy who shows the ability to be Deebo Samuel, but bigger, mm-hmm. right? Deebo Samuel's about 6'1", 6 foot, something like that. But now you got a guy that's about 6'3", 6'4", 220, 30 pounds. So he's really he's a wide receiver, he's a tight end, and he's a running back, all put in one big package. And I think you'd see him used in that way, really in some of those, the ways that you see Deebo Samuel. You see him get used on the sweeps and the screens and those kind of things a lot to play to his strengths as kind of a slash between a receiver and a running back. You're going to see Hurd be put into positions where he's kind of a slash between a wide receiver and a tight end. He's going to be working the inside, and I think if he's healthy and able to play at the level that he was looking towards before he got injured that rookie season, he's going to be a little give linebackers and safeties trouble because of his size and his speed.
I know there was some talk. I think George Kittle was talking about maybe Jalen Hurd playing some tight end. Do you see him fitting into a role like that? And if he is playing, more of a tight end type role, how could he be utilized in that type of role with the 49ers?
Well, I think that's kind of the same. That's kind of what we were talking about with Jordan Matthews a couple of weeks ago when there were, he's switching from wide receiver to tight end and whatnot. With Hurd, you've got a guy who I don't know if he's necessarily going to be a tight end, but he could be that guy who the 49ers tried to make use last year. I can't think of his name right now. That's how good he was.
Are you talking about Reed?
Yeah, Reed. Where Reed was, their initial thought there was he was going to kind of be their move guy and he was going to be able to work, well, kind of in the slot, and he'll be able to line up as a wing and those different things. And I think that's kind of what you could possibly see with Hurd. And go back to what you said, again, where I mentioned it earlier, where I was having trouble with Dee Ford and figuring out where he's going to go on the roster. You can kind of do the same thing with Jalen Hurd. If Jalen Hurd's healthy, then that really could change the way that offensive is structured. Instead of having 6 wide receivers and 4 tight ends, which is usually the way that they've gone in the past, maybe they go 6 wide receivers and 3 tight ends because they're expecting Jalen Hurd to be a receiver / tight end and really kind of fill that role. And when you look at the roster that way, if that was the case, the guy that would be in trouble would be, I would say, would be Ross Dwelley, because he's the other guy that's kind of that type of player right now.
And I think you misspoke. You meant 7 wide receivers, 3 tight ends. If Jalen Hurd makes the team, you said 6 and 3.
No, I meant 6 and 3 because, and the reason I said 6 and 3 is because that frees you up for another for Dee Ford on the defensive side too.
Got you. Okay.
Not have the plumber or to add another linebacker, because right now the way that it looks is it looks with the way the numbers are shaping out, it's going to be hard for them to have more than 4 linebackers on the active roster. So it's going to be that would it would really allow them to get a little more creative in other areas.
Yeah, I mean, if Jalen Hurd makes the team and he's a viable option, I think that spells doom for a guy like Richie James Jr., right? Because that'll be Richie James is kind of like a smaller version of what Debo and Hurd could do. But even if he is healthy, Jack, realistically, this guy hasn't played meaningful football in maybe like 2 or 3 years at this time. Would it be too much to expect for him to be able to actually come in and make an impact? Or is he somebody which is just, have you seen that ability or in a player to just not play for a few years, come in and actually make an impact?
Well, we saw it with Jordan Reed, right? We saw it with Jordan Reed last year. That's what the 49ers did, right? They took, I don't think he had played since 2019 or 2018. I don't think he played in 2019, something like that. He hadn't played for a little while, and he came on and played right away. But yeah, it's definitely asking a lot of a guy, especially somebody, as he doesn't have a history of playing in the NFL like Reed did, to kind of bounce back off of. So right. Yeah, I think we're asking a lot of them, but that's kind of what has to happen in the NFL when you only have 53 guys on the roster. And I don't know if they would be comfortable with trying to slide Hurd through and onto the practice squad or not.
Yeah, and I mean the beneficial thing is when we initially brought Hurd in, he was somebody who was going to be vying for like a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 type role. But now we pretty much have our wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 filled with Ayuk and Debo. So it is going to take pressure off of Hurd to actually perform at the highest level, because he's not going to be dependent on to be the guy. And so I think that actually is good, because he could ease into the offense, and be used, because we still have a guy like Mo Sanu, who I think could be a viable wide receiver 3, and kind of have Hurd kind of just play relatively low snaps initially till he gets his legs under him and the timing down and all that kind of stuff. But it's looking like, man, like if the 49ers could keep these guys healthy, come the end of the season, we're talking about a really, really elite receiving core. We're talking about a really, really elite defensive line. It's a lot of good things to, obviously we haven't even played it down yet, but a lot of good things to be excited about. Me, I'm Mr. Positivity. I think everything is going to go well. But a lot of good news coming out of this press conference and coming out of training camp, even though it hasn't even started.
Yeah, and I know we're going to be getting into some special teams here in a minute. So I think, you had mentioned, something about Richie James and his roster spot. I think when we get there, hopefully I'll be able to throw some information at you that makes you think.
Perfect. You always make me think, Jack, so that's why I bring you on the show. So one of the other things this offseason that was bolstered was definitely the offensive line, right? We re-signed Trent Williams to a massive contract to really lock down that left tackle. Alex Mack coming in from the Falcons to assure to get an all-pro level center, which we had been missing since Richburg had gone down with injury. Aaron Banks, being drafted, who seems to be penciled in as a starter at right guard. And, McGlinchey's still there. He seems like he's put on some weight. Tomlinson, who's an elite level, left guard. So the offensive line seems to be shaping up. What offensive line additions are you most excited about? And let's go through all of them and kind of talk about how you feel like this is going to make the offensive line better this upcoming season.
Yeah, so I actually just wrote about this yesterday for the Press Democrat. And, the 49ers went into the offseason and they made a lot of changes. They spent a lot of money and capital on that offensive line. They made big investments up there. They made Trent Williams the highest paid left tackle in the NFL to bring him back. They brought in – that was their first move. Then they went out and they brought in Alex Mack. I think Alex Mack, that signing is probably the biggest of all the signings that they've made, because that's the position that really hurt them the most last year. That offensive line group is always – that's like they're the biggest guys on the field, but they're like ballerinas, and that everybody – it's all really well choreographed. They all need to know where everybody's going. And that center position is so important because he's the director. He's the quarterback or the director of that group. And when you watch the film from last year, there's a lot of times where guys are just missing their blocks. And I don't know. It seems to be like the calls just weren't where they were supposed to be. So guys weren't getting into the right spots. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that you had, as you mentioned earlier, there was no Richburg. And then so, we're going to have Ben Garland's going to be our starter. They go into training camp a couple days into camp. He's hurt. So now Brunskill, who's supposed to be a right guard, he gets shifted over to center, and he spends all training camp running at center. And then a week before the season starts, you bring in Hronis Grasu to play center, and you move Brunskill back to right guard. Right. And it's just this mess throughout the first half of the season until finally, they realize that Garland's hurt, so he can't play. Grasu's ineffective, so we're just going to go ahead and just ride with Daniel Brunskill. And it was just a mishmash all season long. So I think, adding, bringing back Williams, bringing in a guy like Alex Mack to really coordinate everything. He's going to be really good in the middle of the line. He's older, but he's only missed a couple of games over the last 6 years, which is huge. And then you put Aaron Banks in there at right guard, and Aaron Banks, he's I think what is he, 6'5", 338 pounds. He's definitely
a big boy. Big boy.
Yeah, he's not that normal right guard that you see for Kyle Shanahan, but he has the ability to pull left and right. He has the ability to work his way upfield and cut off linebackers in the running game. And then when you watch him in pass protection, he just dominates in pass protection, and that's going to be, I think, a big help for the quarterbacks and for Mike McGlinchey to have a guy of his ability inside of him.
Yeah, and I was speaking with Rich about this earlier. The one thing in 2019 that is kind of overlooked about the offensive line is there were no competitions for positions on that offensive line in 2019. Everybody knew who was going to play at each position, which I think is important because now instead of competing for who's going to start, you get to focus on continuity and really focus on how that offensive line is going to gel and make those type of moves and how you're going to adjust to different looks that you see with the defense and things of that nature. And especially with, we've talked about these offensive or off-season changes that are made through the NFLPA, and the group that is affected the most is definitely the offensive line because they don't get as much time to really work on that cohesion and mix in their competitions between positions. It just makes that cohesion even less. So to go into this offseason with a pretty well-defined offensive line, knowing who the left tackle is going to be, who the left guard is going to be, who the center is going to be, who the right guard is going to be, who the right tackle is going to be, I think is going to be extremely important. Not only has the talent upgraded, but just the ability to focus and work on cohesiveness. A lot of those things that you talked about, missed reads and missed blocks and things of that nature, a lot of that I think is just going to be minimized just because they're going to be practicing together so much more than they have in the past. How do you think that is going to help the offensive line, and do you think that's going to play a major role overall?
Oh yeah, that's right along with what I was saying. I think if these guys are able, the only battle that I think we're going to see in training camp as far as the starting offensive line is I think there might be Daniel Brunskill running at right guard for a little bit until Aaron Banks really gets his feet under him and takes the position. Very similar to what we talked about at the quarterback position, right? Mm-hmm. Those backups got to show that they're better than the starters in order to take the spot. And I think we're going to see that same thing at right guard, even though we all expect Aaron Banks to become the starter by the time week 1 hits. So I think what you said, everything you said was right on. I think they have a much more well-defined group. I think even their backups are pretty well defined as to the roles, who's got what role, and kind of the roles that are up for grabs there are really only the swing tackle position. I think otherwise you pretty much know that Brunskill is going to be one of your guys that's going to be able to kind of play along everywhere on the offensive line, because he's done that already with the team. He's played every position except for left guard, and I think we might see him focusing a little bit more at center, so he can get more reps with calling them the plays and working with Alex Mack, so that if something does happen, he's going to be a little bit better prepared. And then you've got Jalen Moore, who's going to be he's a swing tackle, who I think they're trying to develop to be the left guard of the future. And then the last position is going to come down to Sean Coleman and Colton McKivitz. And can McKivitz prove that he has the ability to play tackle? All we've seen of McKivitz so far really is him as a guard. But he played tackle in college, and I think that's the expectation is for him to compete for that position, and I think they're hoping he wins since he was the 5th-round draft pick.
Yeah, excellent. And, I know you talked a little bit about Alex Mack and his, what he can do, but I feel like nobody's really delved in real deep as far as having that captain of the offensive line at center, what he could do, and especially with young guys like Banks and McGlinchey still, even though he's been in the league for a while, still pretty young offensive lineman. What do you think he's going to bring leadership-wise, and also X's and O's-wise? How is he going to just overall make that offensive line work better than it has, in previous years?
I just think that he's worked with Kyle Shanahan now on a couple of occasions. He worked with them in Cleveland in 2014, and he worked with them in Atlanta in 2016. So he understands. I think he has a really good feel and understanding for the Shanahan offense and what needs to be done. So I think he's going to definitely be an upgrade as far as he's going to be the coach on the field. He's going to be the guy who's able to help along in Aaron Banks and even Mike McGlinchey to a certain extent with making sure they know everything that's going on. And even on the other side, it's not like the left side of the offensive line was perfect last year. There was definitely some issues over there as well that I think could be improved upon. So again, having a guy like Mack, who's able to kind of tutor everybody and really be that coach on the field, is going to make Tomlinson and everybody else around him better.
Yeah, and I think one thing that was kind of lost when Joe Staley left is really having a leader on that offensive line. Obviously Trent Williams is an amazing player, probably one of the best left tackles in the game. However, as far as leadership-wise, he isn't necessarily known to be, the best leader. But Alex Mack is known to be a leader, and that I think that was something that can really hold together the offensive line, even if maybe there is some, let's say there are injuries that happen, God forbid. But I think having a presence like Alex Mack can keep that offensive line still playing in the right way, because they have that veteran leadership of an all-pro type player that people look up to in the league. So I think that's something that was missing as well. Not just X's and O's, but just the leadership overall. Having a guy like that really can replace what Joe Staley used to bring to that offensive line as well.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Cool. Well, let's move on. Speaking to the running game, Kyle Juszczyk is kind of the forgotten guy this offseason. Not too many people are talking about him. It's kind of like he's so good that we kind of just take him for granted, I think, a little bit. He had a little banged up a little bit last season with, concussions and whatnot. But he's coming back this season. He has a new stable of running backs to block for. He has new guys on the offensive line to help him out. Kittle is going to be back as well. But let's focus just on Juszczyk himself. What makes him so elite, and why is he, such a high-paid, fullback, and, what does he bring to 49ers offense overall?
I think what makes Kyle Juszczyk so elite or so good or valuable for what the 49ers do is that he can play all over the place. He can line up as a fullback in the backfield. He can line up as a tight end. He's played that in college. He can line up, as like a or even sometimes out in the slot or out wide. He can line up all over the field. So what he brings to the table is the Friars can come out and show the defense that they're in 22 personnel, 2 tight ends, 2 running backs. So, when a defense sees that, they expect that's a run-heavy look from the offense they're going to get. So they're going to stay in their base defense and kind of in their run-stopping defense. But then all of a sudden, because of his ability, then they come out, and now it's no longer going to be 22 personnel. Now you've got, like a 21 personnel or like a 12 personnel where it's more of a passing look because they're able to go single back, have Juszczyk out as a receiver, or maybe have him line up as a tight end and slide out Kittle out to the receiver spot. So he just brings so much versatility to their offense, and it makes it just a huge headache for defensive coordinators to try to match up with the 49ers. And that's really what he brings.
Do you feel like, because I feel like near the end of last season, we got to see Juszczyk be used more as a runner. Like they were handing him off the ball in short yardage situations. He caught, a few passes that went for big yardage as well. Obviously, these are wrinkles that Kyle Shanahan has in his offense. Do you feel like we're going to see Juszczyk used more as a skill player, or is he going to just be, the perennial blocker in the run game, kind of opening holes for the running backs?
Well, that goes back to the discussion of who the quarterback's going to be, because if it's Trey Lance, I think we're going to see a lot more of Kyle Juszczyk than if it's Jimmy Garoppolo. Trey Lance is a guy who typically, when you watch him, he has the ability. He has a tendency to check the ball down, not take risks down the field, and throw the ball in the tight coverages, which Garoppolo does from time to time. And instead, he'll take that little check down throw, that easy throw underneath, and let that fullback make a play. He also has that ability to get out of the pocket and move around on designed rollouts and play actions and things like that, all which kind of lead to Juszczyk being a bigger part of the offense. So I kind of wrote something about that about a month or two ago, a while back, basically saying that, Trey Lance is going to bring more juice to the offense if he's the quarterback, and that's truly what I think is going to happen.
And I think so. My big thing is I wish Shanahan would use Juszczyk a little bit more, because I think he's kind of unstoppable, especially when he's matched up against a linebacker or one of these guys that just kind of drifts over to him when he comes out of the backfield. I just feel like maybe he was used a little bit more because of just the running backs were so injured and depleted, and the running back stable has been kind of refortified. So I hope that wasn't just like Kyle Shanahan being like, well, we have nobody else, and now that he has all of these options back, that Juszczyk's just going to go back to his his role, because I feel like even though Juszczyk is like one of a good soldier and doesn't really complain too much, you kind of saw a little bit more of a pep in his step when he was being used, to run, or got to catch some balls outside, and run from some first downs. So I hope he is used, but I don't feel like he will, just because Kyle Shanahan kind of stuck in his ways when it comes to stuff like that.
No, I agree. I really would like to see him be utilized more. You're paying him you're paying him way above any other fullback in the NFL to be on your team, and then on top of it, you go back and look at Bill Walsh's time with the 49ers and look at the number of times that Tom Rathman touched the ball. And Tom Rathman was always looked at as more of a run blocker, but he caught the ball a lot and he ran the ball more. So definitely think that Juszczyk could be utilized, and his skill set would be something that I think could really hurt defenses, especially when you have a guy like George Kittle taking that middle level. You've got receivers. If you got a quarterback who can now stretch the field, you've got Brandon Ayuk able to take the top off the defense and get down the field. Then you get in the middle zones, you've got Deebo Samuel and George Kittle to work, and now that leaves your underneath zones for your fullback, and that's the little drop back and little dump offs and things like that, like what we saw with Rathman so much during his time with Joe Montana and Steve Young. No,
absolutely, and it's just it's a play that I think could work at such a high clip because the defense isn't expecting it, right? They're not expecting Juszczyk to ever be thrown to or ever be utilized. It seemed like whenever they gave the ball to Juszczyk, it was a big play or it was effective, right? They got what they wanted out of that play. So it would be nice to utilize it more. But I'm not too keen. I would have bet that Kyle Shanahan is going to change his ways and start using them a little bit more.
Okay.
So let's move on. Good old Grant started a little bit of a wave this weekend when he started talking about, the punt returner. And I think something that is overlooked a lot in the 49ers is the special teams isn't necessarily the strongest when you look at it. Obviously we have a pretty automatic kicker, but that's only 40 yards and closer. We don't have really a stretched field goal kicker that's going to be pretty consistent outside of 40 yards. And then our punt game is just so bleak. We are the kings of the fair catch. And Kyle Shanahan is just extremely conservative as far as the return game. So I wanted to talk about in a perfect world, if the 49ers did have any type of return game, how do you think that would affect the overall play of the team? Would it enhance it? Do you think it'd bring it back? And then touch on why you think Shanahan is just so conservative in special teams.
Well, just have a better kick return game. It just helps out the offense, because instead of being stuck starting every offensive possession at your own 25-yard line, or just having fair catches all the time inside your own 20, whatnot, where you've got to go full fields. If you can get some punt returns, that really is going to help you out. That was one of the things back in 2011 that really helped the 49ers out, was they had Ted Ginn returning kicks, punts. And they had some big punt returns, which really helped set them up. And that's something that the 49ers haven't seen a whole lot of during Kyle Shanahan's time. Some of that is partly due to, he doesn't really have a really good punt returner that he's utilizing. I mean, I would like to see him put Ayuk back there to return punts myself. But I don't expect to see him do that, because that's just not the way he handles it. So, it's interesting, because I saw the discussion. So I went and looked at it. The 49ers actually returned the ball average 9 yards per punt return in 2021, which was better than they did in 2019 when they went to the Super Bowl. The year they went to the Super Bowl, they only averaged 8 yards per punt return. But what doesn't show up in that stat is, that's all in punt return. So that doesn't include fair catches, right? So that's not when a guy does a fair catch and it's, at his own 8-yard line, or when a guy calls a fair catch and he catches the ball and there's nobody within 20 yards of him, like Craycraft did out in Dallas, or even, earlier in that Dallas game when I think it was Trent Taylor calling for a fair catch and then runs away from the ball and it lands like 3 yards to the side of him and gets down deep, and they fumble the ball a couple of plays later and everything else. So it doesn't really show up there. I think when I looked at this, when I'm talking about the return game in general, we're talking punt and kickoff. The biggest difference between the 49ers kickoff return game in 2020 compared to 2019 is they tried to force Jerick McKinnon to be their kickoff returner. Mm-hmm. And that was just a disaster. He was awful at it. I don't know why they continue to put him out there, other than they were trying to get their money's worth out of the guy, because in 2019 Richie James Jr. was their kick returner, and he did a really good job at it, and they were one of the better teams in the league. In 2020, they were the fourth worst. They were 29th in terms of kickoff returns. So, that mixed together with an offense that has a lot of issues, and you've got a quarterback who's, you're on your backup quarterback. You can't return the ball past your own 25. Oftentimes, even when they try to return the ball, if they're getting tackled inside that 25, it's a no-go, and it's something that they need to fix. And I think Richie James Jr. has got to be on the roster in 2021, and he's got to be their kick returner.
That'd be great, because I love Richie James Jr. and especially in that I guess victory formation, to see him do those backflips would be amazing to continue. And going back to Ayuk, I understand why you can't use him every single time. Obviously, he is the best receiver that we have. You don't want to risk injury or risk wearing him down, taking on those type of kicks, but I wish they would look at how the Eagles used to use Deshaun Jackson when he was a kick returner, because he was also, one of their best receivers at the time. And they wouldn't use him every single kick return. They would use him when they needed a home run. They would use him when there was they needed a momentum changer, or when there was like an opportunity to get a big play out of it. Like they pinned the guy back in, near the goal line. They pinned the punter back in the goal line, and you could maybe get a touchdown out of it. Like, how would you like to see them utilize Aiyuk? Would you want him to be like an every down punt returner, or more as just like in spot duty when it would be a great opportunity for the team to like maximize it?
I think it's if they're not going to have him be your every down, every kick return guy or punt return guy, then yeah, let's go ahead and throw him out there more than 2 times, in the season. I think that's what they did last year. I think they put him back there a couple of times, and I think you returned a couple of them, and it was pretty successful with those. And he had a few that were for catches, but try to get him involved at least once or twice a game. If it's a tight game or you're behind, throw him out there in those games. If you're blowing a team game, there's no reason to do that, right? But if you're in a tight ball game or you're trailing after the first quarter, do it. Give him out there, give him a shot. Maybe he's going to be a spark that just turns the whole thing around. I know. You go back to, this is old school. John Taylor. He's going into the 49ers Hall of Fame, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go back to 1988 with the 49ers, and they were really struggling about halfway through that season. They were 6-5, and they were playing a Monday night game against Washington at home. And John Taylor gets he catches the ball like deep. I think it was like his own 8-yard line. You're not supposed to catch the ball there and run it, but he does. He ends up making an unbelievable kick return and runs it all the way for a touchdown, and that just completely blew that game open and really changed the whole narrative of the 49ers. They went on from that point to win the division, and we know what happens from there. They go on to win the Super Bowl with him catching the game winner.
Yeah, and it's not like the 49ers don't have that type of talent on their team, right? They got a guy like Brandon Aiyuk who used to do that in college. A guy like Ambry Thomas now they just drafted, who's another guy who's had some experience returning the ball. Even that running back that they took, in the 6th round, seems like a speedster. Maybe he could, return some kicks or return some punts as well. It's just weird. I mean, for some reason, Shanahan just seems anti taking the risk. It's just, and I get it. We've seen, it wasn't too long ago where the 49ers were playing the Giants in the NFC Championship game, and we pretty much had the opportunity to win that game, and it was a muffed punt that ended up losing us that game. So I understand it's a risk reward type thing, and you gotta kind of measure that, but just seems like we're never taking a risk, and it would be nice to see a little bit more risks in Shanahan, but like I said, I'm not holding my breath on that one. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think somebody over in the comment section said it, and you mentioned it, and I think I did too. If nothing else, if it's a tight game or a big game, throw him in there, see if you can give him a spark. But I don't, and even Ambry Thomas, I know he has the history of returning kicks at Michigan. Heck, he even played a little bit of offense while he was there. But I don't think that again, if they're expecting him to be competing for a starting spot, or he's having a key role in the defense, maybe they're not going to want to use him in that role either. It seems like they want to use guys who aren't really they don't expect to do anything else anywhere else on the team to be their returners. We saw it with JaMycal Hasty. We saw it last year, and same thing with Richie James.
Yeah. Well, that's basically what I had so far. Anything off the top of your head, Jack, that you wanted to talk about, or?
No, I think we did a pretty good job of covering the top, the main things that we saw in the 15 minutes of the press conference that we were able to hear. Just kind of looking around at Twitter since that point, it doesn't really seem like there was a whole lot of other information out of it. Maybe there was that'll come out, but I haven't seen it yet. No, I'm excited that tomorrow the team that we finally get to have guys on the field, and all of the talk and guessing and everything. It's still going to be there because we're not all going to see them on the field until we get to a preseason game. But at least we're going to start getting answers to everything that we've been discussing for the last almost 6 months now.
Absolutely right. And Jack, why don't you tell everybody where they could get a hold of your content now with the Press Democrat, obviously your YouTube channel, but where can they follow you at? What they should be looking forward to, upcoming new articles you have coming out and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so we've got you've got my YouTube channel. I'm not sure if there's a link in here or not, but if you just search up Jack Hammer _NFL, you'll find it there. But it's It's in the description and my Twitter handle is jackhammer_NFL, and my link to my YouTube page is there. As far as the Press Democrat page, that's let me just figure out that one for you real quick. So the inside the 49er, that blog is, you go 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. So if you go 49ers.pressdemocrat.com, takes you directly to the Inside the 49ers blog, and you'll see the first couple of articles up there for me, and the other ones are older. But there's 2 of them up right now, and I'm currently working on a 53-man roster prediction that'll probably be going up. Probably going to be up tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to have time to get it done today, because we're doing this now, and then I'll be on again at 3 with Grant, and then tonight we have Niner Chatter at 6 o'clock with me and Big Ben Meyerson. He's going to come on and guest host with me. We'll see if we can wear the kid out. Last week's show went almost 3 hours. Piner got on there and made sure everybody understood about the concern that we all should have about having gymatitis and whatnot. So it was a lot of fun last week. Hopefully it'll be kind of the same thing now, and there's definitely a lot more to talk about with camp opening up.
Beautiful. Well, Jack, I appreciate you coming on the show. Like we said, guys, if you weren't here in the beginning, Jack and I are going to do this every Monday at 7 p.m. on the West Coast. So please make sure to mark your calendars. We'd love to have you guys in. Love all the comments you guys put in. Love the interaction. And, appreciate you guys coming in and being a part of our day every single day. So until next time, guys, keep it so real. We'll see ya.